I was born and raised in a small town. There was no need to look for a bride all over the world. I lived not far from Camilla. It was here, in this very place, that the events unfolded that determined my fate and eventually led to the breakup of my marriage. The dairy was the only real business in the city, and it was also located right on this street. I worked there as a technologist for almost 4 years, and Camilla was the manager. But then disaster struck. The dairy that was once the heart of our neighborhood has been sold. The company was bought by a businessman unknown to all of us from Italy, it seems. At least it was known where he came from. Nothing else. He stripped her of all her equipment. He only needed the building. What had once been a thriving local enterprise had turned into just a warehouse under Daniel's leadership. But in truth, it was not just a warehouse. It became a cover for the illegal production of counterfeit alcohol. The scale of the operation was staggering. Trucks rolled in and out 24/7, loading up with whatever they were peddling. I'm sure the authorities and those in power knew exactly what was going on, but it was clear that this was business as usual. And not just any business, but one with its fair share of corruption. The name of the businessman Daniel had a reputation that stuck. It was a name synonymous with something vile, a slimy creature you wouldn't want to cross paths with, and so the locals turned it into an acronym, GAD, short for reptile. This nickname was passed around like a quiet whisper behind closed doors. Despite their dislike for him, the townsfolk kept up the appearances, only speaking of Daniel on the benches where they gathered. To be fair, I have to admit that the locals took over the dirty work. They loaded, cleaned, and recycled everything on Daniel's orders. He paid a little, but on time. As for Camila and me, we were having a hard time, and we were getting by on odd jobs. I thought about going to a bigger city and finding something better, but the thought of renting a place confused me. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if it was worth it. So I didn't work for that bastard. I had my own sense of pride. I've been friends with Eva and Jacob for many years. We were close as a family. We always went to visit each other. But since I lost my job, I haven't been able to afford the luxury of socializing. My friends worked for Daniel, and Jacob knew exactly what position I was in, how difficult our relationship had become. One day they came to visit me, and as usual, the conversation turned to my situation. How long are you going to keep struggling like this? Look at your life. It's a mess. It's a blessing you don't have kids. But if you did, what would you do? Go work for Daniel. He's looking for a guard and a storekeeper. The pay's not great, but it'll keep you afloat. I shot back, my pride flaring up. I don't need anything from him. That bastard deliberately ran the dairy into the ground. I was a respected professional there. And now you want me to stoop to working security for him? Not a chance. Eva shrugged and said, well, then keep being proud. Camilla did not delay the resolution of this issue. I later found out that she had secretly asked Jacob to come and ask Daniel about any vacancies. Thomas, this is a way out of our financial mess. I gave in after about a week. She managed to get a small advance, which was a lifeline for us, especially since we'd been living off little more than bread and water. May arrived with warmer days, and I threw myself into fishing, selling whatever I could catch. But even with the decent haul I was pulling in, it still wasn't enough to carry the weight of being the sole provider. It was Camila's salary that ended up holding us together financially. Then, as if it wasn't enough that he had taken over the dairy, that bastard Daniel decided to open a grocery store right next to our house. By then, Camila had proved herself at work. She was sharp, organized, and dependable. Daniel offered her the position of managing the store, and she didn't hesitate to accept. The grocery side was just a cover-up. The real money was in the sale of bootleg booze. Drunks from all over the area flocked there. I kept walking around like some proud turkey, strutting about with a full stomach. But the truth came crashing down on me, and I learned about my wife's infidelity from Jacob. With Daniel, it wasn't easy to see what was really going on. All that gold around her, All gifts from him. Gianna, the shop assistant, overheard the telltale sounds coming from Daniel's office, and I finally pieced it all together. I couldn't just pretend nothing had happened and keep walking around, belly full of good food, while they were making a mockery of me. I wanted revenge on both of them. But as I stood there, staring at the situation from the outside, I realized the truth. If I had been able to earn any real money, maybe none of this would have happened. But then again, how could she do this to me? Especially with him. I didn't even wait for Camila to get home from work. I packed my things, decided to leave for the big city, and borrowed some cash from Jacob. I wrote a note to my wife. I know everything about your relationship with Daniel. I'm leaving, and I'll file for divorce myself. Just so you know, this is my parents' house. When I return, I'll rent it out. If I find anyone else living here, I can't promise what I'll do. Later, Jacob told me that Camila had moved out. Daniel, meanwhile, was still married and had no plans to change anything in his personal life. He only needed Camila for work and, of course, his own pleasure. In the store, both employees and the regulars who came in for booze started calling her the reptile. Everyone knew about her affair with Daniel, but they kept their distance, not wanting to get caught up in the mess. She was arrogant, rude, and it was this attitude that eventually led to her downfall. On her way home from work, she was attacked. A group of thugs hit her on the head with an iron pipe and robbed her. They were caught, and they explained it by saying that they didn't have enough money to deal with a hangover, and they were angry because the manager, Camila, refused to give them a drink. They decided to get even with her. The injury was so severe that she needed surgery, and eventually she became a burden to her elderly mother. As for me, things started to look up. A twist of fate changed everything. As soon as I got to the city, I saw an ad for a technologist position at a dairy plant. The salary was great, and they provided housing. I didn't hesitate. I called them up, and without even an interview, they hired me on the spot. Sure, the job was all the way on the other side of the region, but that didn't matter. It was a chance I couldn't pass up. And honestly, it was a blessing. I'd already settled into my new place. I got divorced, found a decent job, and even met a woman who works at the same factory. I heard on the local news that Daniel's shady business dealings and his warehouse had finally caught the attention of the authorities in the capital. The district officials were all flying around, and Daniel himself was under investigation. Jacob told me that work was getting scarce, and soon he and Ava would also be looking for new opportunities. That's life, I suppose.